Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing the brand new Toyota CHR, and I'm saying brand new because this car received a mild facelift recently. And compared to its previous version, it has a couple of minor styling tweaks, but not to a huge extent. So the CHR from the get-go looked very good, but what is the CHR? In the first place? Well, it's Toyota's answer to the current craze of creating SUVs and crossovers of all shapes and sizes. Basically, it's a Corolla on stilts because the technical platform underneath is shared with the Corolla. And even the engines and the batteries are shared. But I'm gonna talk about that a bit later on. For now, let's discuss the design side of things. Well, the facelift brings new headlamps and the new shape for the front bumper, but it's a small incremental change. You have to look really closely and have a keen eye for details to realize just what changed. For example, the fog lights have changed their position from down low to over here, and we have a couple of styling tweaks, but very small in overall. This car we're driving today has the GR Sport package on it, which means it comes with a lot of gloss black trims, both up front and on the sides. So you'll notice these trims over here, these over there, and they look good. This over here is standard. They look good, but I'm not sure they will be very good on the long run. And that's because gloss black has a tendency to scratch very easily, and these are all trims on the outside. So I don't know, in case you scratch them, I don't know if it's easy to paint them or repaint them or anything like that. From the sides, you'll notice the same thing. We have a gloss black roof and gloss black trims over here on the doors that might also get scratched over time. We also have the top 18-inch wheels on this car, which come part of the GR Sport package, and they have a forged aluminum design. They look really good. And that's about it. Around the back, the same applies. Quite a few small changes have been done, but the car looks roughly the same. We have LED backlit tail lamps, and of course a lot of gloss black trims, and we don't have exhaust tailpipes. I mean, we do have an exhaust tailpipe, but it doesn't have an exhaust tip. So it's hidden under the rear bumper, which has some details, some design details that are supposed to mimic some sort of tailpipe. The boot has 373 liters, which is decent, but it has a rather steep loading lip. That might be an issue for some people, not for me, because this car isn't particularly tall. It's just a bit raised from the ground. But the good part is you can fold the rear seats and get a bit more room, up to 1500 liters. Inside the cabin, the first thing you're going to notice is that the gloss black trim fashion continues, and to quite a large extent. So we have gloss black trims basically everywhere, and I'm told that this is partly because this is the GR Sport version. So we have gloss trims, gloss black trims on the doors. We have the center console is one big gloss black trim. We have them on the dash, and we even have them on the steering wheel. Now I have to say the steering wheel looks rather nice. Being the GR Sport version, this has leather, perforated leather on half of it, and it has red contrasting stitching on it. Looks really good actually, and feels really good to the touch. And on the steering wheel we have the usual buttons for various functions. I'm gonna talk about that a bit later on. Also, the seats are GR Sport seats, which means they come with contrasting stitching and Alcantara upholstery, which looks rather good, and they feel rather good. They are comfy and a bit stiff. It's an interesting mix, but what I like about them is that they offer great lateral support, and I actually fit in them. Now, normally on cars of this size, I would have an issue with sport seats because they normally don't fit my backside, which is on the wider side of things, but not in the CHR. We also have the HVAC controls over here on the dash, and the dash is slightly tilted towards the driver, which is nice. I am grateful we don't have a touchscreen over here, but instead we have traditional buttons. This is the way I like my HVAC control, so that I don't have to take my eyes off the road too much. As for the infotainment screen, I've said it a number of times in my reviews about Toyotas. It's old, the resolution is old, and it feels old. You have some shortcut buttons over here, but still, it's not great. We don't have a navigation system on this car, but you do get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and that saves a lot because you can use that interface, which actually looks okay on the screen. You only get one USB port over here, which will be used for connecting your Android Auto or Apple CarPlay in this car, but I'm surprised that they didn't include more USB ports. You only get one traditional socket in the armrest in case you want to use a charger for an additional device. The last thing I want to point out is the instrument cluster, which is analog, but it has a screen in the middle. So you have the speedometer and fuel gauge on the right, and you have the power indicator on the left because it's not a rev counter. It just shows you when you're using the internal combustion engine power, or when you're driving in an eco-friendly mode, or when you're recharging the batteries in the back. That's about it. Let's hop in the back to see how things are back there. Sitting in the back of the CHR reveals its shortcomings. For example, you get less legroom than in some of its rivals. Now, I'm 6 feet tall, about 250 pounds, and this is how I fit behind a driver of my size, because this seat has been adjusted to my comfortable driving position. So basically, it's as if two people of my size would be sitting back to back. So, yeah. I do touch the seat back, and if I sit up straight, I do touch the roof lining. So that's something you might want to keep in mind. But considering not everyone is as tall as me or as big as me, I think you could get plenty of room for smaller sized adults in the back of this car. The seats are wrapped in Alcantara. They look good. But the biggest issue you will have in the back is this shape of the rear window, which is rather small. And while the car may look good on the outside, the people sitting in the back will get a claustrophobic feeling on longer trips. So depending on how often you will have people in the back of your car and how tall they might be, you might want to reassess whether this car is for you or not. But let's be honest, these days, most people will be driving these cars alone in the city, so that wouldn't be a huge issue. Driving the CHR will feel very familiar. If you've ever driven a hybrid Toyota in the last, I don't know, 20 years, that's because it has the same drivetrain as all hybrid models in recent years. It feels the same. So I said this is a Corolla on stilts, and I mean that because the powertrain under the sheet metal is the same. So you get two hybrid versions of the CHR depending on the market you're in. There's a 1.8 liter version and a 2 liter version. Both of them use hybrid setups, as I already said. The 1.8 liter version has a 1.8 liter engine under the hood, and develops in total 122 horsepower. The 2 liter version has 184 horsepower, and the 2 liter naturally aspirated Atkinson cycle petrol engine under the hood. Now, what you need to remember about these engines is that they are very efficient. The 2 liter one, for example, the one we're driving, has an efficiency of 41%, which is really high. And in order to achieve that number, Toyota had to 3D print a lot of parts in it to ensure the highest of tolerances. So it's a really good engine, but it's hooked up to a eCVT gearbox, which basically means whenever you're driving it, the car will feel a bit laggy. So when you accelerate, the engine will rev up to the optimal rev range, and it will be kept there by the car's computers to make sure the car is as efficient as possible. From that point on, the car will accelerate using the gearbox, which changes its multiplication one step at a time. So it feels very fluid, just like an electric car. But you have a certain disconnect between what the engine sound is and how fast you're accelerating and going. It's an interesting feeling, The car is not slow by any means. It will do 100 kilometers an hour in under 9 seconds. It's not neck braking either, but thanks to the electric motor, it has instant torque. So it really accelerates fast. Its top speed is 180 kilometers an hour, and if you get the 1.8 liter version, the top speed will be 170. That may be disappointing for some, but remember, there's a trend going on right now with car manufacturers dropping the top speed limit of their cars to make us all safer on the road. That was started by Volvo, which started limiting its new cars to 180 kilometers an hour by default. In this case, it's a mechanical limitation, but I don't think that's going to be an issue because this car was meant to be driven around town most of the time. It's not great outside the city limits because the fuel consumption will go up. So, because you have a hybrid setup, most of the time around town, you will be using the electric motor and the battery is stored in the back. So setting off from a stoplight, you will accelerate electrically. Once you reach a certain speed, and depending on how much you press on the gas pedal, the internal combustion engine will kick in. The transition is seamless, but you will hear the engine. No vibration whatsoever, but you will hear the internal combustion engine. Then you will accelerate to a certain speed or maintain a speed, and when you're starting to slow down, the internal combustion engine will be shut off and the car will be using the electric engine, the electric motor to recuperate energy and save some fuel. So this is a very efficient setup. Around town I saw an average fuel consumption of about 5 liters per 100 kilometers covered, which is quite amazing. However, outside the city limits, the fuel consumption went up. So at an average of about 75 kilometers an hour, the fuel consumption was about 5.5. And then at highway speeds at 130 kilometers an hour, the average fuel consumption was 6.4. And that's because at higher speeds, the car relies solely on the internal combustion engine, and the batteries in the back and the electric motor turn into dead weight. So it's normal to have the fuel consumption go up. However, the electric motor will help when you're overtaking, will chip in, which will give you a boost. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But overall, the car feels comfortable, between comfortable and rigid, because it's a bit on the rougher side of things in terms of suspension. But I actually like it. The bad side is, I mean, I wouldn't have an issue with the fact that the suspension is a bit on the stiffer side of things, but if I wouldn't have an issue with that if the car would keep its composure better over whenever you're pushing it hard in sport mode or something like that, when you're trying to drive it in a sportier fashion. But it does lean a bit whenever you do that, and it's not even that heavy. It tips the scale. This 2-liter version tips the scale at about 1.5 tons. But once again, this wasn't necessarily designed to be a sporty car. You can tell that by the fact that the tires on this car are Michelin Primacy 3, which are ultra efficient tires, not necessarily the grippiest tires on the market. However, if you consider this car for city usage, if you're considering it for, I don't know, a young person needing a car to go around town, do its thing, maybe, you know, hit some potholes without getting stuck over there, or navigating busy city roads, this car is actually quite good. It will sip very little fuel, it's comfortable enough, it's decently sound insulated. I mean, it's not perfect, and especially outside the city limits at higher speeds, you will notice the lack in sound insulation because the internal combustion engine under the hood will be revved up quite high, and that will bring about a bit more extra noise inside the cabin, but it's not a huge deal. And anyway, as I said, this car is meant to be used primarily around town, but if you want to go on a longer trip, it's fine. Just remember, it's going to sip a bit more fuel than around town, where you will be using those electric resources a bit more. I would mention the prices at this point because this is like, we're getting close to the conclusion, but it will depend on the state you're in, on the country you're in. The rivals of this car are the Peugeot 2008, the Citroën C4, the Skoda Kamiq, and every single car in that segment based on the same platform over at Volkswagen. And they are generally cheaper, but none of them are full hybrids, and you need to keep that in mind. Some of them are mild hybrids, but that's nowhere near the same thing. They won't be as reliable, they won't be as frugal as this car, and they don't come with the same kind of warranty. In most countries, Toyota offers a 200,000 kilometer warranty on these cars and 6 years of warranty. So that's a pretty good deal. That said, this has been my review of the Toyota C-HR. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm sure I didn't cover all the bases, even though I tried. Let me know in the comment section below what more would you like to know about this car. I am more than willing to answer the questions as far as my knowledge allows me to. Until next time, don't forget to like, share, and of course subscribe, and to feed your passions. Ciao.